have the pleasure this morning of being joined by Sam Scott. Sam is the Executive Director of Operations at Muir Housing. Sam, how are you?
I'm really good, thank you. John, how are you?
I'm not too bad. It's a Tuesday morning when we film this. It's gloomy, but the weather's meant to be getting better by the end of the week, so can't complain. But Sam, we've had a couple of conversations before you've jumped on the video with me today about a few things we're going to discuss. But I think first and foremost, people who may not know you would like to hear a little bit about what you get up to, who you are as an individual, and the work that you do with Muir. So, yeah, would you mind making a little bit of an introduction just to let people know what's what?
Yeah, absolutely, no problem at all, John. Yeah, my name's Sam Scott. I'm the Executive Director of Operations at Muir Group Housing Association. For those of you that don't know Muir Group, we have about 5,500 homes, and we are quite geographically spread. We operate in 32 different local authorities spread across the country, which brings as many opportunities as it does challenges. My role is quite a broad remit at Muir Group. I sit on an exec team of 3 people, and there's myself, the Chief Exec, and the Exec Director of Resources. So my areas of responsibility really are everything that's frontline or expected to be operations. So a sort of frontline housing service, supported housing, the contact centre in one area. Property services covers everything as you'd expect around response maintenance, plan maintenance, and landlord's health and safety compliance. And finally, the third area of my operation is assets and growth, which is effectively development and return on assets. So yeah, it's been quite an interesting 4 months in terms of leading that area of the business on a sort of operational level and a strategic level as well. But yeah, that's me. That's what I do. Yeah. Yeah, been there quite a while as well.
Long in the tooth, but it's kind of on that piece that we're going to bringing it forward, that in a sense that you have so many hats that you wear within your role.
Yeah.
Obviously, lockdown over the last kind of 3 to 4 months has meant challenges for every discipline within housing, but because you cover, as you mentioned, all customer facing and frontline services, how have you found that kind of, looking after the housing division, looking after prop services, looking after development? Have you approached each one the same, or have you kind of had to kind of change your approach depending on what, the person you're speaking to on the other end of the camera?
Yeah, I mean that's why I love the job that I do. Really, it's so varied on a day-to-day basis. In normal circumstances, never mind in a crisis situation, and obviously the lockdown and the issues have affected every single part of the operations department differently, and some more significantly than others. But all have been affected. So I think I've approached all of them in the same way, but it's had to be different solutions to different issues. So obviously, in the sort of communities and customer service, we had to move the contact centre home within 48 hours. All our sort of independent living schemes were locked down. We couldn't let homes. We were really focused on what does that mean in terms of cash collection, void loss, all that type of stuff in that part of the business. Property services was essentially just completely shut down, apart from our work around compliance, which is obviously really, really important to us in terms of health and safety of our customers. So that's been a particular challenge. And obviously in development, all of our development schemes closed pretty quickly. And I suppose, as soon as we'd sort of demobilised, which was relatively straightforward, it was hard, it was difficult, it was very intense work. But almost as soon as we demobilise, we're thinking, right, what does remobilisation look like in each area? And I think that's been more tricky, actually, because whilst it was quite difficult to turn the taps off and turn them back on, which taps we're turning back on, how much we're turning them back on in each area, has been a bit more tricky to navigate, particularly over such a wide department. So I think we've approached all of them in the same way, but it's been different solutions to different challenges and issues.
No, and I think that's interesting because you're almost at the behest of what the government's going to come out with next as to what you open or don't reopen. So, and it's on that as well, because leadership is such a topic at the moment about how people have managed virtually in lockdown, with a variety of different personalities, people that live with family, people that live on their own, very numerous different circumstances. How have you found that your leadership style may have evolved, and how has that, led you to kind of maybe looking at things a bit differently moving forwards? What have you found in terms of, because obviously you manage a considerable team, to say the least?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably it's like 85% of the association's workforce sit within the operations department. Like you say, lots of different disciplines within that as well, which is made it more complex, I guess. But I've learned an absolute stack of stuff through lockdown about the people I work with, about myself, about the culture of the organisation, which has been absolutely fascinating. I think the main thing I have learned is that all those preconceptions about how this might affect people, certain people in certain circumstances, have just been blown out of the water. And I think it's a real personal issue. This I know in the last session you talked to Eileen Evans about mental health and well-being, which has been massive for Muir Group through this lockdown. Right from day one, we've really had to focus our time and attention on that. And I remember on the first day when, as a management team, we decided that we were going into lockdown and having to have conversations with different teams, just to see the different reactions of people was fascinating. Some people you didn't see them for dust. They had the laptop, they were whizzing off home because they were used to that type of work environment. And others are like, what am I going to do now? I've never worked from home before. I've not got the setup at home. I've got 3 kids, 4 dogs, this, that, and the other. And I was actually one of those people. I don't, in the past, haven't worked from home. But right from the day one, to see how different people reacted, it was a penny drop really about how this is a very personal issue for people. People have different jobs. People approach their work differently. People have got very different home lives, and when you squeeze all that together at home in a very non-agile way, the number of permutations that come out in terms of how people feel or react to that is just infinite, isn't it? Exactly. So I was really interested to see the session with Eileen Evans about mental health and well-being, because a lot of our leadership time, has been focused on keeping people connected, supporting people, keeping the organisation going in very, very difficult circumstances, as well as all the operational stuff that I've talked about before around stopping services, starting services, and all the other issues around that. And stakeholder engagement has been really, really important as well. Working with our customers to make sure that they're supported, and we're spending a huge amount of time doing that for obvious reasons. We're conscious of the fact, whilst we're all been struggling with the situation, there are people out there that are struggling more, particularly those that are vulnerable, people that are shielding, etc. So huge amounts of staff resource time has been spent supporting those people. Quite rightly, that's what we're here to do, financially, emotionally. From a leadership perspective, making sure that all those bits of the jigsaw are in place to keep the business going, to keep people supported, has been really tricky, but really rewarding and really enlightening as well, actually. And that's where I think I've learned a lot about myself in terms of my approach to leadership over the lockdown. How we go forward is a different matter, isn't it? I think we're now into we started off with a sort of command and control type approach. We need to lock down. Then we're into sort of operational planning. Feels now like we're in the sort of strategically planning what the new will look like. Lots of talk in the sector around agile working and what that means. Clearly, as an organisation, those mental health and well-being challenges aren't going to go away. We need to keep our eye on those and I think embed those in the practices of the organisation, which we think we do at Muir Group, but I think we need to probably pay a bit more attention to that in the future as well. So yeah, it feels like we're in that sort of strategic planning stage now, where we need to try and make sense of what the future looks like, working with the other members of the exec team and the board on planning for the future and determining what the new leadership style looks like.
Yeah.
Support that.
Because I think as well, it's been a real eye opener to yourselves at Muir, we at Greenacre as well. Because we talk, we as a management team talk every week, but I'll still schedule coffees with colleagues, friends in the business I can chat to. Obviously, we talk a little bit about work, but we also talk about, I'm a diehard rugby fan, I'm a nerd, so we talk about everything under the sun, and it just helps, isn't it, just to have that level of contact with people, and you're not just sitting isolated in your office, your man cave all day, just buried on the phone. So no, it's good to have that outlet, but also, like you say as well, the strategic thinking of how do we implement a post-COVID sort of world, virtually as well as office-based. How does that work out? But in terms of that, looking forward, obviously you mentioned about how you at Muir are going to kind of adapt to what future way of working looks like, but where do you think the sector itself is going to look? Well, what is it going to look like after, say, 18 months, 2 years time, as we understand COVID more, we understand ourselves more? Where do you think the sector as a whole will be in 2 years' time, let's say?
Wow. If I knew that, John.
You've got to be a gambling man, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, we had our sort of full staff quarterly briefing the other day, and we'd invited colleagues to ask questions beforehand. And as you'd expect, there's lots of questions around Agile Working. But there's one question around, when we get back to normal, and the chief exec had asked me to answer that question. And I answered it, we're not going to get back to normal. No. How it was before, it's not going to be the same again. The workplace isn't going to be the same. The work that we do is not going to be the same, because whilst there's some horrendous stuff that's come out of this crisis, there's also been some some positive outcomes, some learning and some silver linings from the whole process that we need to embed within the way we work going forward, not only to provide better service to our customers, but to potentially be more efficient and cost effective as well. I think it has, to a certain degree, woken us all up to the art of the possible. In terms of the sector, I think that, there's lots of conversation at the moment around how we operate, but not where we work, how we work as well. And I think one of the main lessons for me is it's taught us that, when there's a common goal there, and there's no barriers, and everyone just naturally collaborates to get something done, i.e. lockdown, it happens within the space of 3 or 4 days. Now, you look, I'm not just saying in your organisation, but go back over time, and some of those bigger issues that you've grappled with, we can't do that because of this, that's been turned on its head a little bit. And I'm quite keen for not just Muir Group, but the sector to try and capture that. That's a really good foundation for innovation and collaboration, isn't it, going forward? So I think we'll actually come out of this a lot stronger as a sector.
Okay.
I think we will hopefully start to think differently, start to push more boundaries quicker as a sector. How that comes out in different parts of the business will be different in each organisation, but I think some of those golden nuggets that have come out of what has been a pretty horrific time for everybody, we should capture, and we should make the most of it, and we should think a bit differently for the benefit of our customers and our communities. And if we can do that, then, like I said, I think the sector and each organisation will come out stronger.
I agree completely, and I think you mentioned that. People had to really. The joke I always say is that 18-month transformation programs were, effectively achieved within a week, 2 weeks type of thing, whether it was, Agile Working, new IT systems, or anything of that ilk. And like you say, if that's the time that it can be implemented, then maybe we do need to look at things differently. So no, I think you've really hit the nail on the head with the sector can learn a lot, and it will be stronger and more robust, shall we say, when we come out the other side.
Yeah, I mean, and you think about what was achieved in a short space of time. There wasn't a 3-month project management leading period, where you had your sort of, project mandating, all that type of stuff that you'd expect with sort of project. You just did it. And, we wouldn't undo every piece of work like that, because you need some sort of control mechanism around it. But there's something in there, isn't there, about how we can work smarter
Yes.
when we need to, and when that collaboration is essentially forced by a crisis. And I wouldn't want to deal with that all the time.
Yeah.
But there's definitely some lessons learned there. I think in terms of some of the things that concern me about the future. I suppose it's the long-term impact of what we've gone through this year. Obviously, we talked about the mental health and well-being issue, and I think that has to be high up, if not the highest up on all organisations' agendas, without a shadow of a doubt. But it's those economic implications as well. I worry a bit that we're going to see a period of austerity coming again around the corner, and as we know, austerity generally hits the poorest and the vulnerable the hardest. That some of our customers fall within that group, and that really concerns me, because we've been dealing with a decade of austerity and seeing that the impact that has on individuals and communities. So that worries me quite a lot. And I suppose the other thing that concerns me is that that move to agile working, that some organisations will jump to that without giving it some proper detailed thought, and that they might lose some of what makes them a good organisation in the process. Certainly at Muir Group, we're keen as a management team to move to a more agile working environment, but to do it in a very measured way and a thoughtful way, with full consultation with our colleagues and customers.
Because I'm the same. I like to be in the office, meeting people, and but do I need to do it 5 days a week? Me personally, no, I don't. But it is, again, if it's offered, I think the best way, and you may agree or disagree, but if you offer it to the business as a whole, some will say, yeah, I'd like to do this. Some will say no. And I think as long as you can offer it in a fair way to everybody, then people that wish to take it up or have a mix or don't do it at all and wish to be in the office still, that's the perfect blend. And
I think the sweet spot's going to be creating an offer and arrangement that suits every individual, but also strikes the balance between that and being cost effective. There's no point in having a 20,000 square feet swanky office if 8 people work there on a daily basis. So it's striking that sweet, and that comes into the planning, doesn't it, I guess. And I suppose the other thing is that what's the draw of an office? The draw of an office for me was I knew that when I went in, there would be certain people there at that office that I would interact with should I need to. That's not going to be the case anymore, because there'll be no guarantees that those individuals will be there. So I think the draw of an office and those positives will change as well, I think.
Absolutely. Well, I'll leave it there, because, like I say, I'm sure me and you could talk for hours on this. We'll do, obviously, probably after the call's finished. But also, just before you do go, I believe you are a Twitterite, similar to me. So where can people find you if they want to give you a follow? I know that you've recently acquired Pooches, so the pictures have been glorious. So, what's the Twitter handle for you, if you can remember it?
That's a very good question, John. So my Twitter handle is @SamS_Muir, capital S and capital S at the end of Sam.
Wonderful. Well, I'll point people in the right direction as well. But as well, how do people say goodbye? Are you a waiver? Are you just see you later? What's your protocol for saying goodbye on Teams calls these days?
I'm definitely a waiver, John.
Okay.
Definitely a waiver.
All right. Well, we'll sign off the call with a wave then. Well, look, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thanks, John.
You take care. Bye-bye.